welcome to the show, and we're going to get started right away with our guest today, John Davis. This is one you're not going to want to miss, so sit tight, listen in, and here we go. Well, hello, John. Thank you so much for being here and joining me today on the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Well, it is an absolute pleasure to be here. And as we both wind into Christmas, this is a great way to spend my day today with you.
Absolutely. Yes, I appreciate you taking the time. And, I so enjoyed speaking with you. I think it was just about a couple weeks ago. And from that, you really left me with some things that were super interesting. And I'm so glad you're here today because I think the audience is really going to love some of the stuff you have to share. I know, like, if I really connect with it and love it, they're going to love it too. And, and so before we dive into some of that, if you don't mind just kind of sharing with us how you even got to where you are. I know it's quite a story, but I think it's a really important story to share just some of the context and how it's not just like you showed up where you're at today.
Sure, great. Um, I grew up in a very large Catholic family, number six of seven. They stopped naming after four. I'm kidding. um, so as I grew up, I had all of the Catholic guilt and all of the Catholic stuff that was going on with that. My mom had her master's degree in liturgy and head of liturgical doctrine in our Catholic Church, which meant that when the priest wanted to do a sermon, he had to pass it by my mom. So
Mm.
we were Catholic. um, when I turned 18, my mom said the most profound thing I've ever heard a parent say to a child. She said, "John, spirituality is a personal journey. Go find what you believe."
Mm.
And I did. I immediately became an atheist because I like sleeping in on Sundays.
There's one reason.
Right. Yeah, that was it. But my journey was interesting because I started, of course, with atheism. I decided not to believe in God or anything larger than myself. I call it God because mom was Catholic, but I think it can be called many things, source, universe, yada, yada. Um, but I look at it from the perspective of now I became an atheist, and suddenly, within a year of being an atheist, I was depressed.
Mm.
It's like, because suddenly when you have nothing to put belief in, you're kind of like at the mercy of the news cycle. And at that time in the 80s, we were going through hardcore Cold War and fears of nuclear war, and it was just really a scary time at that time for me personally. Um,
Right.
but ev- but eventually, what happened when I was 19, I had a huge epiphany that was life changing. See,
Mm.
my father wasn't a kind man, and my father definitely had racist and homophobic tendencies. And he didn't treat me very well. I was the one weird kid in the family who was having strange experiences, like talking to imaginary friends and
Mm.
out of body experiences that my brothers and sisters later told me on. And I crucified my GI Joe in the backyard, which was kind of weird for my mom, right? So
A little bit, maybe.
a little weird, little weird. Mom wasn't pleased. Let's just put it that way. um, but when I was 19, I walked into a convenience store, and uh, the cashier gave me $5 too much change. And as I walked out of the store, I'm reading, I'm counting the change, and I realized it. And I turned around, went back inside. I said, "You guys, you gave me $5 too much change." And the next person in line says, "Well, there's something you don't see every day, an honest person."
Mm.
And I suddenly felt this rush of pure love, and it was 19 years old. I'm feeling this rush of pure love. Now, understand, when you have a father who's not not kind to you, shall we say,
Mhm.
you try to please that father, your parent. And
Yes,
I
I
I
understand
was
that.
well on the way to being a racist and a homophobic with them.
Mm.
I was very much on that road. And as I walked out of that store that day and feeling that feeling, halfway out to my car, I suddenly had this weird recognition that I knew what that feeling was.
Mm.
And out loud in the parking lot, I literally said, "Jesus, is that you?" And
Wow.
I felt it again.
Wow.
And the next day, I wasn't racist. I wasn't homophobic. I had a complete epiphany that had changed my experience. So then, of course, that put me on a new journey away from atheism and into agnosticism, trying to figure out what the heck that was, right? And then I studied Buddhism and Hinduism and Baha'i and Wicca and Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra and Eckhart Tolle and blah, 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 blah. Went down the whole rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
And this was the 80s when all the new age stuff was at its heyday, Doreen Virtue and all of those guys are out there. And um,
Sure.
so I was in this midst of this journey, and I ended up at the time I was performing at Renaissance festivals doing a comedy sword fighting show called Hack and Slash,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to a party in Canada and at a friend's house because we were performing up there, and I was in a room full of people, everybody I knew. Some of them I knew well, some of them I didn't know very well, but I knew them. And this woman kept staring at me from across the room, and I knew that that woman was his wife, that guy's wife, who's right next to her. I said, "Why is she staring at me? This is weird." Suddenly she gets up, she walks across the room. She stops right next to me. She looks down at me. She says, "You know you walked with Jesus, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did that." And I kept on going. The fact that I said, "Yeah, I did that," like was mind blowing for me because I didn't believe that at the time. I didn't think, but it naturally fell out of my mouth that way.
Isn't that interesting?
Fascinating to me. So then I ended up having a second session with her. I left there. I was like, "Lady, get away from me." I went to the Maryland Renaissance Festival, parked my camper because I had an Airstream travel trailer at the time. And suddenly this big RV pulls in and parks directly across from me, and the door opens up and that woman gets out.
Mm-hmm. The
So
same
the
woman.
woman, the same woman.
Yeah.
So like we're like hundreds and hundreds of miles away from where we just were, and she's parking directly across the street from me. So, which is just
Irony.
crazy.
Yeah.
So we set up a second meeting. Um, in the second meeting, I was heading down to Rehoboth, my hometown. It's a beach
Mm-hmm.
resort near on the East Coast. And she said, "Well, I'll ride down with you for the day." So she and I rode down to Delaware, and we're sitting there on the beach in Delaware. It's like this beautiful. We were on Cape and Lopin, which is, if you ever look at the state of Delaware, there's a big point that sticks off the bottom. That's the Cape and Lopin. And
Gotcha.
she and I went and sat on the beach, and she says, "Just close your eyes." I just closed my. No, she says, no, she didn't say close your eyes yet. She said, just take a breath, relax. She says, "I'm going to go just see what comes through."
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, her voice changed, her demeanor changed, her eyes looked like they were a brighter color. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and she started saying, "John of old, John of new, I love you. I've always loved you. I will always love you. I'm with you. I've always been with you. I always will be with you." And
Wow.
I'm like, "This is crazy, right?"
So
I'm
she's
still
like in
in,
a like channeling then.
she's full trance channeling, and it's not her.
Uh-huh.
It's somebody else's voice even. She
Wow.
says, she says, "Do you see me?" I said, "No." Right? Because I'm looking at her, right? She says, "Close your eyes and see." And as I closed my eyes, it was like my eyes opened up somewhere else as they closed. And I was
Wow.
looking at the back of my hands, which were down in like coarse, pebbly sand.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at my hands, and I looked upward, and there were feet right in front of me. And I looked up again, and there was the guy I now call Jeshua, Jesus, standing
Mm-hmm.
above me, laughing at me for being on my face. Right, right, right. Literally laughing
You're
at me,
like,
right?
this is an experience.
Well, it was crazy, right? I ran away from it. I said, "This
Which,
is insane. This can't be real. What did she do to me, to make me
right.
have this experience?" And I was like, "Get away from me. I don't want to be the guy who thinks he's Napoleon." Right,
Uh-huh.
right. And I I went up onto the festival site in Maryland when we got back, and I was just walking along, and I saw a friend of mine I'd known for 20 years. And we sat down on a bench. "Hey, what's going on in your year?" And she says, "Yeah, it's been a great year, but I have to tell you something." I go, "What?" She says, "You know you were John the Beloved, right?" This was somebody entirely different and
And you're like, no.
someone I knew and I trusted. And I was
Right.
like, "Oh my, oh my." So then I'm still trying to avoid the whole situation because to
Mm-hmm.
me, it's too much. It's too big. And I go to Florida where I'm directing the Renaissance Festival down there. And Um, I go to the holistic festival, and I'm walking along the row where all the readers are reading.
Hmm.
And this lady stops the reading, runs out of her booth, grabs me by the arm. She says, "You know you were John the Beloved, right?" And then it happened again and again and again. Eventually, 19 different readers told me spontaneously that.
Wow, 19.
19 of them. And then I was like, no more, no more, no more crazies, no more
Are you getting
psychics.
the message?
I'm stubborn. I'm stubborn. Finally, I said, all right, God, if you want me to know this and you give me a direct sign, don't bring it through somebody else.
Okay,
Well,
that's fair.
the universe, God has a sense of humor.
Uh-huh, for sure. I agree with that.
Because about two hours later, a buddy of mine comes in, John, you should read this book I'm reading. What is it? He throws it to me. It's called Edgar Casey on the Millennium, and it's
Okay.
all his predictions for the millennium. Oh, no, so all right, let's see what the old guy had to say. Right? Sat down, started reading page 32. John the Beloved will again be named John.
How funny is that?
Yeah. So I said, okay, that's the sign. I'm going to go get a past life regression from a certified doctor of hypnotherapy, someone who
Gotcha.
really went to school for this stuff.
Right.
And I went and I trained with this lady for a week. I went to her for one night. She gave a meditation. She sent me home with recordings of her voice to train
Hmm.
with her voice for a week. I came back and she regressed me. And the first vision in my regression was so bizarre because I was looking down and I could see my legs were bare.
Hmm.
And my first thought was, oh, good, I'm not an apostle because they wear robes,
Hmm.
right? I found out later after doing the research what I was wearing was called a fisher's coat. It was the
Ah,
thing that the Galilean fishermen would wear when they were fishing, because if you're wearing robes in the boat, you might get sucked under by the robes.
that would make sense.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there, I'm repairing what looks like very raw nets. I'm tying pieces together so that there weren't gaps in the thing. And she says, "What's the next most important moment?" And the next most important moment was I could see people running down the beach, like
Hmm.
hardcore running. And she said, "Where are they going?" And I looked down the beach, and there's a crowd formed down the beach. And she says, "What did you do?" And I said, "I went." And start walking towards this crowd. As I get closer and closer to the crowd, I can feel this pure love, and it was palpable. I mean, you hear me in my regression going, "Oh my God, you can feel it. Oh my God, you can feel him. You can feel him." It
Wow.
was like John knew who this person was before he got there, but he'd never met the guy, right?
Uh-huh.
And I pushed my way through the crowd. And as I get through the crowd, there's this man who looks at me like he'd known me forever. And he smiles like, "Oh, hey, it's you." And he walks over and he lays his hand on my chest. And John of old left the physical experience. He had a near death experience at that moment.
Wow.
And he crossed over into the pure love of God, understanding the awareness of oneness of everything and the separations of love and fear and all that stuff, right? And the regressionist says, what's the next most important moment? And the next most important moment was feeling all my fears and my anxieties. Because had I never felt my fears and anxieties, I could never come to know love more fully. Because
That's
I have
beautiful.
to have something to measure against, right? And by the way, that that was painted 6 months after the regression.
Uh-huh.
So that painting is what I remember from the regression. And this is
That
this is
you did.
I painted both of these, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's him and his wife. And yes, I said wife.
Yeah. That's a whole nother
No.
topic. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know his wife because he literally called her Ishti in the regression. And so,
Oh, wow.
and Ishti means wife. So it's like, yeah, absolutely. Um, so here's where the regressionist kind of messed up.
Hmm.
See, a past life regressionist will take the person to the end of the life
Okay.
that they're living, just to have that, to understand the meaning of that life and everything. And at the time, John was feeling all his fears and anxieties. He was watching Jeshua walk away. And
Mm.
the regressionist, not knowing what John was actually seeing, said, "How would you feel about seeing his death?" Now, in that moment, it wasn't the death of John he went to. The next experience I had was being at the foot of the cross watching him being crucified.
Oh, really?
And in my regression, you hear me screaming. If there's a video on my channel, you go
Hmm.
there, it's called Two Moments from My Regression. And you hear the
Hmm.
moment I met him and the moment of the crucifixion. And if anybody's faint of heart, that's a hard video to listen to or watch because you literally hear me screaming in agony. So,
Mm. Well, I'll
a lot.
definitely be listening to it. I haven't listened to that one yet.
Yeah, yeah. It's oh, I'm not that good of an actor, so I couldn't have faked it. Right. So, um, but now now that after all these experiences, I really went into study, and I really started studying everything, and then I started finding all of the commonalities that I learned in that moment of crossing back into the physical. I
Hmm.
found it in Buddhism and Hinduism and Baha'i and Islam, Christianity, of course, but none of them have the complete picture. They have snippets and pieces and parts, but God, universe, consciousness is everything we experience, including all those religions. And so,
Hmm.
not one of them has the end all be all. God can't be encompassed by any one school of thought or religions. It's much broader. And so, for
Right.
me, people ask me what my religion is now. My religion is now I am John and I am love.
Mm. That's very simple and very powerful at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. The simplicity thing is the most important thing to me because something else I said in my first regression was it's so simple, we have a hard time comprehending it.
Yes.
And so now I measure everything against simplicity.
Yes. That is so powerful because we do get caught up in the complexity and the story, right? The story in our mind running about all these meanings and all these levels around it, which goes into religion and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But so like from this whole story, it was like it wasn't just that one thing happened. It was just little things over time is what I was hearing that just kept coming to your attention and kept coming to your attention. And then you're like,
Whether I wanted it to or
whether
not.
you wanted to or not. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was being like thrust upon me. And finally, after so much, you just have to say yes,
Yeah, surrender.
and that's exactly what I did. And wow, my life changed dramatically in
Yeah.
tremendous ways.
Yeah.
Tremendous ways.
So from what I'm hearing, you would have never kind of seen where you are now.
Right. Oh no. Oh no. And it was funny because let's see, about 3, 4 years ago,
Hmm.
I kind of had run away from spirituality in a way again, because what I had done was I was traveling all over North America, speaking at Unity churches and metaphysical centers. And every time I come back each year, I'd talk to the same people with the same problems. And I
Uh,
realized that none of them were actually following what I was teaching. They were
uh-huh.
just too interested in my past life story.
Oh, I see.
So what I did was I took
That
all of
like
the lessons.
attachment. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I took all of the lessons and I wrapped them in a corporate vocabulary. So, manifestation, creation, goal setting, achievement, right? And
Yeah.
I went into the corporate world teaching the same thing just without my backstory.
Oh,
And
interesting. And what was that
and it,
like?
it was very unique because there is definitely a schism because I'd be on stage talking and I was doing fun stuff in my speeches. I was doing whips and nunchucks and everything else in my speeches too. Um, and to prove my point, the last thing I would do in one of my speeches is I would choose the most timid person I could find in my audience
Uh-huh.
and use and alleviating their fear and managing their timeline to the present. I took that most timid person, and then under 5 minutes, they learned to crack a whip and hit targets out of my hand
Wow.
just by managing their fear and changing their timeline.
Wow, that's really
Right?
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And so when COVID hit, um, I was really exhausted because I was, as a corporate speaker, I was doing 70 speeches a year, which
Wow.
means over 200 days of travel a year.
Right.
Right.
That's a
And I
lot.
was worn out. And I didn't feel authentic. I felt like I was
Hmm.
hiding a part of myself. And I came back to myself pretty much. And I said, Thank you, God, for the opportunity to help people all over the world in profound ways. And the next thing that happened was I became a 60-year-old YouTuber. Who knew?
Surprise.
Right, right. And that led me to do private sessions. And last year I did over 1,000.
That's
And
lots.
I spoke to more countries than I've been to, and I've been to 30 countries.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've been talking to people all over the world for the past since I started, and
Yeah.
a lot of that comes from my big interview on Alex Ferrari's channel, Next Level Soul. But
Well, that's how I met you, was from that show. So, yeah,
oh, okay. So you want to hear how you're part of a manifestation?
absolutely. I'd love to hear it.
Okay, so COVID kept going, and during COVID, I had accrued some debt to keep a roof over my head, like a lot of
Hmm.
people did during COVID. I said, "Thank you, God, for the abundant income I am receiving to pay off all of my COVID debt before my birthday." Amen. Now, what I just said there sounds very prayer-like, but if you break it down, it's a completely present moment statement. Every part
Yeah.
of it is present moment. The day after I said that, I got a response to an email I'd written 4 months earlier. Hi, Sean. This is Alex Ferrari from the Next Level Soul podcast. I'd like to interview you on my channel. The interview went live in March. The day before that interview, if you'd have booked a private session with me, you could have talked to me within 10 days. The day after,
Wow.
it was 4 months.
Wow, that's incredible.
And
That
about a
is,
month later, it was 10 months, 12 months. And then right now it's
yeah,
about 3 months. So this is the closest it's been in a long time. But yeah, so I had all the money to pay off the debt within 2 weeks.
that's really incredible. And I think what you said in there about the present moment statement, that's oftentimes what we're missing is like we're projecting it out so far, or it's like 6 months from now or whatever, but it's really about being here now and
Yeah.
stating it like it's already done
Yeah.
and believing that, feeling that, would you say?
That's and the belief is the key, and that's found in all of the spiritual texts. That's
Hmm.
found in all of them. Um, most people don't realize that they never leave their present moment. All right, the future is just a place where you set goals, but every
Hmm.
experience you've ever had will be in your present moment, right?
Hmm.
And your past is just a collection of present moment memories. So it's a matter of this is the pinpoint of creation, and realizing that this is the pinpoint of creation means that what you think about this moment is exactly what's going to happen the next. Buddha said, "What you think, you become. You create your world." Krishna said, "Thought by thought, you forge your destiny."
Hmm.
Uh, but the Bible says, "As a man thinketh, so is he." Shakespeare said, "There's nothing good nor bad, but thinking makes it so." It
Hmm.
always goes back to this present moment thought. Amen. Most people don't realize, even know what it means, but it means so be it. It means right here, right now, it's done.
Hmm.
And so it's about the belief. But most people think of it in the form of affirmation or prayer. Now, I don't believe in affirmations for a very specific reason, because the word affirmation means I'm shoring something up I have no confidence in.
Ah, yes.
Why would you need to affirm it if you believed it?
Right.
Right. So I
That's
believe in
interesting.
declarations. I believe in declarations. But most people, they'll talk to you about prayer,
Hmm.
and they're praying to an external source, God, consciousness, whatever it is. They're praying to something, hoping they'll be saved by it,
Right.
but they don't believe it's happening.
Right.
Right? They're not actually doing the things that are in alignment with those beliefs. Right?
Yeah.
And people tend to lose and get frustrated when things aren't happening in the now, but they don't believe it's happening in the now. Right?
It's a whole
So
paradox or contradictory.
exactly, it's like water flowing towards you.
Hmm.
Right? The water being everything that your experiences are made out of. The flow towards you is how time works.
Hmm.
It has to be that way because you never leave your present moment and you have different experiences. So time
Right.
has to be coming to you, flowing into your experience, and then becoming your memory. And so the reality of it is what you think, say, and believe about this present moment is what you're going to experience in the next. And
Hmm.
so it comes down to understanding that all the power is yours.
Yeah, that's again just so powerful. And as you were sitting here talking, I'm like, well, what do I believe in this present moment? And I was like, that this is the best conversation I've ever had. It's going to impact lots of
Yeah.
people. Like it's super informative and like just so soul touching though, or heart touching of um how you speak about religion and then just kind of tying it back together. Like I love on your channel you say recovering Catholic, right? Is how you have
Mm.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the
And
reason I say that is because I talk to a lot of people who have guilt and self-doubt because
yes,
the
that's where I was gonna go.
teaches that. Teaches that.
Yeah.
I
The
mean,
guilt, the shame, the well, basically you're always wrong because you're not
yeah,
ever living up to the standard, right? And
right.
so there's all that guilt and shame that spirals down from there. I didn't grow up Catholic, but I grew up Presbyterian, Baptist, like that kind of um and I went to church for years growing up. Like we went every Sunday. That's what we were supposed to do. That's what we did as long as we got there, which is another story. But whenever we went,
All kinds of stories about getting to church, isn't
maybe that story's for next time. But
there?
if we did get there, I remember sitting in church and like it was so grand. This church we went to was really beautiful and the music was beautiful. That's all I remember and resonate with. I cannot tell you hardly
Yeah,
any stories from the Bible because it was just like I either blocked it out or part of me just felt like it never made sense. I innately felt that.
right,
So,
right. Well, I love your use of the word resonate. It
mhm,
resonates, right? Vibration. Nikola Tesla said, to understand the universe, you have to understand energy, frequency, and vibration.
mhm,
Well, all of them are resonant. So to understand the universe, you have to come from the feeling space, not the thinking space.
mhm.
Because the thinking space is where we try to figure things out and try to put structure around things. And I think this is the direct meaning of the story of Adam and Eve. They ate from the tree of knowledge, they got kicked out of paradise.
Right, right, right.
Well, paradise is a feeling. For me, it's a beach. For somebody else, it's a mountain. But it's not the
Yeah,
place; it's the feeling it engenders. It's what resonates with us, right?
resonate. Yeah,
And
beautiful.
so when you look at it from that perspective, what resonated with you in the moment was how beautiful the place was, and how that sound resonance really you liked it, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so that was the relationship to it, right? My mom, I asked her, like I said, master's degree in liturgy. I asked her, I said, "Mom, why'd you become so Catholic?" She said, "I had my first out of body experience during a mass."
Really?
Yeah, yeah. And so she was in a mass, listening to the beautiful resonant music, fully believing that she was connecting to God,
Yeah.
and she went out of body. So she did everything in alignment with everything I talk about, but she attributed it to the Catholic faith.
Gotcha. So still
And she
something
almost Yeah, she almost
external.
became a nun. Yeah, yeah. She
Wow.
almost became a nun. Until she met my father and had 7 kids.
Yeah.
Um, but
Plot change.
going back to Catholicism though, or to Christianity in general, you're
Yeah.
born in sin,
Hmm.
right? So you're born bad, right?
Right.
And I'm going to do a Catholic route here, so 'cause that's what I know. So
Yeah.
you're born in sin. You have to be baptized to make you a Christian, to
Hmm.
save you from hell.
Hmm.
But here's the interesting thing about hell. Hell is a Christian construct. So they're saving you from something that was created by the faith.
Right.
So
That's
it's like
yeah.
questionable, right? So
Yeah.
then you have, yeah, in Catholic faith, you have First Communion, which is where they say, look, you're a good Catholic. Here's a big party for you, some cake and all kinds of cool stuff, right? Then you get 13 years old where you start to have cognitive reasoning and you start to be able to
Hmm.
think for yourself. And they say, you better confirm you're Catholic. And you have to go have a confirmation. And
Hmm.
then you get a little older and you get a little bit rambunctious and you start skipping mass and you start doing those things. And they say, well, you know what? You do bad things, but there's only one place you can be absolved of those sins. And in the Catholic Church, that's the confessional.
Right.
But then you have to come back to the church for the confessional. And then when it comes time to suddenly have all your libido kick in, if you have, in the Catholic faith, if you have um, inclinations towards the opposite sex, you are to get married and have babies with more original sin.
Right.
And if you are do not have that inclination, you've just received the holy orders and you must become a priest or a nun.
Very clear.
Very clear. There's no way out. There's no way out, right?
Right,
So
right.
so looking at my studies all these years, I found I if I when you read the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the writings of Buddha, the Bible, the writings of Baha'u'llah, you look at them, and if you put on your love goggles and you just start reading them all from a love perspective, they
Hmm.
all say the same thing.
Hmm.
When you put your fear goggles on, they all say something different,
And you're forced to choose.
and you're forced
And-
to choose.
Yeah.
Fear is of the mind of man, love is of God.
Hmm.
The Buddha literally says the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. So it
That's
literally, and
powerful.
the Bible says it too. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil,
Hmm.
for thou art with me, thou being God, being love, according to the New Testament, anyway. According to the book of John. Thank you very much.
You might know that book a little bit.
A little bit, a little bit. I've read that one once or twice.
Well,
Editing.
I know my research into like spirituality or the different religious texts is like about that much. So I appreciate your perspective of like the depth to
Mm,
which you've really explored that. And without all the exploration, that's when it really started to make sense to me. And that's also part of the manifestation of even us connecting is
yeah,
2020. Like 2020 changed everything. And
everything.
I went through the opposite cycle where I actually made the most money I've ever made that year, and I worked really
Mm,
hard. Yet then at the end of that year, I felt so disconnected and felt so like I'm really missing something and something's not happening. That
mm,
I felt that void within or that
yeah.
disconnection. And so that set me on my spiritual journey to really exploring some of what you're saying. I read parts of the Course in Miracles, parts of this or that. I haven't been able to make it through maybe Yogananda. I have his book
Mm,
over here. It's like really thick. But from all those other books I was reading and the podcast, which I found you on Alex Ferrari, his podcast of just like taking in all this information, that's what it started making just much more sense. Like you were saying, that resonating. It was
yeah, yeah,
resonating of like, this makes way more sense looking at it from love, looking at it from um there's only like this portion of the stories like we've been told or the
yeah.
portion of the
And,
understanding.
and one of the YouTubers that I love is a guy named Dan McClellan.
Uh-huh.
And Dan McClellan is a Mormon, but he's a Bible scholar. And
Mm.
he does not allow his faith to interrupt his scholarly work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting. Like I watched two or three of his videos this morning, and it was so interesting to hear him talk about all of the differences between each version of the manuscripts and how the Masoretic text is different from this text and how the King James version, King James had all of the things taken out of the Bible that could be used against the monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So the books have been altered and changed, you know, as per the social perspective of the time,
Mm-hmm.
and also originally the texts themselves are written from different viewpoints from different authors, and
Mm-hmm.
which is why you have two different versions of the Judas death story. You have three different versions of the walking on water story. You have multiple versions of the birth story, and most of those stories, the scholars believe were additions to later on, like the fourth century. And so,
Okay.
that's why I say put the love goggles on, because when you have the love goggles on, the teachings are clear, and
Uh-huh.
even in the end of the New Testament Jesus says, I leave you one commandment, love one another. And if you did that,
Again,
you
simple.
wouldn't need the
Yeah,
other 10,
right.
right?
Simplicity.
Exact simplicity. Absolutely.
And isn't that like part of the human whether it's the human condition or the human habit of like we want to go dissect everything. And like in that dissection is where we lose so much of the simplicity, the power of it,
Yeah,
the
yeah. Well, that's
understanding.
just it. That complexity itself means it's of the mind, not of the feeling, not of the resonant, right?
Hmm.
Um, it's interesting when you think about it from the perspective of simplicity itself being the measure, because Occam's razor clearly states, given all, the simplest solution is the right one.
Uh,
And so you look at it from that perspective. It's like, if that's the case, then and like, let me put it to you this way. Right now, if you go on YouTube, there are Bible scholars, there are theologians, there are New Age gurus, and they're all debating and arguing right now
hmm.
about who's right, about what that means, what that text means. Not one of them is loving one another.
Mm.
Not one of them is actually living what they claim to believe. They're just arguing over who's right
Their point, their
and
viewpoint.
their viewpoint. And some of them are vitriolic. I have 1,700 videos on my channel right now. I In every one of them, I guarantee I say the word love in every one of them. I
Mm.
guarantee I say the word love in every one of them. I also guarantee that I promote just going out and loving one another, simplicity with simplicity.
Right.
I've never had a Buddhist say a harsh word to me. I've never had a Hindu say a harsh word to me. I've never had a Baha'i or a Muslim say a hard word to me. I get called the Antichrist on a regular basis, and a blasphemer and a heretic, and you're going to burn in hell. And
uh,
I get that. I've never had any other religion but Christianity say that to me. So
hmm.
they claim to be following the teachings of Jeshua, but they also claim that they shouldn't be judging, right?
Hmm.
Judge not, lest you shall. But what is calling me that? That's judgment.
That's quite interesting because that was the reason I really tried over the years to be more involved in church as I was a teenager. And I actually used to think there was something wrong with me, that it
Mhm.
wasn't working, right? Or that I
Right.
just really didn't fit in that space. And I went to many different churches in I think through like 20 and tried different many churches, checked things out. I was like, I just not finding the right one. Then I finally realized it was just not for me. It doesn't mean I
Right.
will never go. It just means I really felt that this wasn't where I was to be. But part of that being just that, I mean, it was just so ingrained in
Right.
the mind of like if I don't
From
choose,
childhood.
yeah, from
Yeah.
childhood, if I don't choose, then, I'm being judged, something's wrong with me. And it was through several different experiences that I was like, well, I'm being judged for even being there.
Yeah.
And,
Right. Right.
being a young mom and I had a daughter that was out of wedlock and stuff like that, that was like, well, when are you getting married and all those things. So
Mm.
it um it was just something that I could never figure out. So I love these perspectives adding to that. If it's just from love, then it would just be total acceptance of where everybody's at. And
Well, and we judge our world from our perspective that we've chosen. It's a
hmm.
chosen perspective. And sometimes is when we're children, we don't get to choose. We're just told that that's the way it is.
Hmm.
And when I went to Egypt and I traveled through Egypt for a month, it was lovely. It was great. I had the greatest time. Everywhere I went, I was treated like a prince. I was invited into homes for dinners, and I mean, I really had a great time in Egypt. Day 20, I climbed Mount Sinai, and when you climb Mount Sinai, you start at 1 o'clock in the morning, because you reach the
Okay.
top at sunrise, and you're
Wow.
watching the sunrise over the Sinai Peninsula from the top.
That must
Beautiful,
have been incredible.
breathtaking, breathtaking. I started climbing at 1 o'clock in the morning. About 2:30 in the morning, an hour and a half into the climb, I hear a voice being yelled in the darkness, John, John. Now, let me tell you, when you're on the side of Mount Sinai in the darkness and you hear your name called, it's pretty trippy.
Yeah, I would think so. It's those imaginary friends again.
But it wasn't them or it wasn't God either. It was actually the manager of the hotel I was staying at.
Okay.
He ran up the mountain an hour and a half to give me his coat because he thought I'd be cold.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
That's how I was treated the entire time I was in Egypt. Everywhere I went, everywhere I went. The next day, I came down the mountain and I went to St. Catherine's Monastery, which is right at the base of the mountain, which is also where they found what's known as Codex Sinaiticus. The first version of the Bible was found
Uh-huh.
in that monastery.
Okay.
And I was like, I was in the monastery, and it was like all Byzantine and all the Byzantine art and the priests with the long beards and the incense. It was like the greatest sensory experience in the world. And I'm walking around and I hear this voice say, "Hey, John." No, I'm sorry, he did not call me John. He said, "Hey, you American?" I said, "Yeah, I'm American." And he says, "Me too." He says, "Have you been having problems since you've been here?" I said, "No, not at all. I've been treated like a prince." He said, "Everywhere I go, people want to fight me." 5 minutes later, I wanted to fight him. No, I'm kidding. he he was a Christian traveling in a Muslim country and expected the Muslims to want to fight him.
Uh, he
And
was
so
already coming in with that. Yeah.
his entire experience was that, right? His thoughts were this, so God gave him that experience. And
Right.
when you look at it from the perspective that your thoughts are creating, you know, the first lines of the book of John, once again, greatest book in the Bible, thank you very much.
No bias at
It
all.
says, yeah, right, right. It says, in the beginning is the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Your words, your thoughts, your beliefs go out to God, consciousness, yada, yada, whatever you call it. And it shows you those beliefs in the image around you. And we are created in God's image. If you think about where you are right now, wherever you are, who's listening to this podcast, wherever you are, just look. If there's a wall beside you or a door of your car beside you, wherever you are, just look at that thing for a second and realize that that thing is made of atoms. That wall's
Hmm.
made of atoms, that door is made of atoms. And atoms, according to Einstein, are simply an energy event in motion.
Hmm.
Then realize the air between you and that thing are also atoms. And then realize your eyes are made of atoms.
Hmm.
So what are you? You're your consciousness. And all this is a reflection of the beliefs you have. That's why negative people see a negative world, because they believe the world is negative and God gives them the vision of a negative world. And
Hmm.
so that one Bhagavad Gita quote I gave earlier, I want to complete that quote now. It says, "Thought by thought you forge your destiny. Therefore, to keep your mind upon the positive rather than the negative is considered the austerity of the mind."
Mm. That's a
So
great quote.
people look for negative, they see negative. People look for positive, they see positive. I tend to think I'm looking positive. I like looking positive.
Well, I love chatting with you, and we always seem to laugh.
Yeah. And
Time.
can I tell you the secret about laughter?
Yes, I was going to ask you if we didn't get there, so it's perfect.
Yeah, the secret of laughter. A true laugh. Talk about resonance, right? It feels great. It
Hmm.
resonates well when you're laughing. A true laugh has the two key elements of every big spiritual experience. It's completely present, it's completely fearless. During that time, you weren't suffering or struggling with what you were thinking. During that time, you weren't worried about pains in your body. You were just laughing and just fully clear of those things. So you were the closest you've ever been to God in that moment in your laughter. The majority of my regression memories are laughter, being in that space of just freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is people search in this world for their authentic self. Well, their authentic
Absolutely.
self
That's,
is the laugh. Go
yeah.
ahead.
I was just going to say that's a very, I don't want to say trendy word, but that's a very talked about phrase right now of being authentic, being your authentic self. So, what does that mean specifically to you?
Well, see, we in this world live in a world with stimulus, and the stimulus is coming from various fears.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world of fear. That's why we come here to experience our fears and anxieties, as I said about my regression, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, all through our life, we have stimulus coming in, and we put on masks to match the stimulus. We go to work, we put on the mask of a good employee. We go
Mm-hmm.
work with people at work, we'll put a mask on of being a good coworker,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then we go out with our friends, we put on the mask of whatever we picked up during our time with our friends, right? And then we all come home, and what's the first thing we do when we come home? We go, "Oh God, so glad to be home," and we
Yeah, put
exhale.
the hoodie on and the sweatpants and just,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So whenever we have a fear response, we suck air into our lungs and we hold it. It's the primal fight or flight response. The reason we exhale when we get home is because we've just taken our masks off, the masks of fear that are created in our life. To be fully authentic is to be without those masks, can be completely clear. And you look at my YouTube channel, every so often you hear me say it, and my intro to my channel says it too. I only speak my truth. I only speak what I believe. And when somebody comes and tries to challenge me or make me defend my faith, my response is I don't feel the need to defend it. I just because I believe it.
Hmm.
Right. So it's like I am unapologetic on my beliefs and I just say them, right? And
Well, then
oftentimes,
also don't have the need to be right
right,
in
I
there.
don't right, right. Because I think, my mom said spirituality is a personal journey,
Hmm.
which means every one of us is having our own subjective experience anyway.
Right. So what's the
So
point of arguing so deeply
yeah,
about that? Yeah.
to me, if you're being loving, I have a friend who was really deep into the 1980s law of one channeled material, and it makes no sense to me. When I read it, it I will never believe that because it's way too complex for me.
Hmm.
But my friend is the most loving, caring, wonderful person you'll ever meet, and so I think he found his way. That's his spiritual journey. I, I love in the book of Matthew when they talk about false prophets, right? The way they're identified is by their fruit. And so I see my friend who's the law of one material, and his fruit is that he's loving and caring,
Mm.
right? All the Christians who attack me on calling me a blasphemer and a hypocrite and all those things, I say to them, I respect your beliefs. You just don't respect mine, right? Because
Hmm.
that's you. But if I'm going to measure by our fruit, I'm going to accept your beliefs and love you as you are. And you're going to
Hmm.
judge me and hate on me and give me horrible things. So your fruit is bitter,
Hmm.
right? So I always come back to my own belief as well. Whose spirituality is working for him, right?
Yeah.
Right. So in reality, they can't be a happy person if they have to be judging all the time.
Right. Right. It's
But
exhausting to be judging all the time.
did that answer your question? I
It
hope it
did.
did. I
It
was
did.
off on I'm sure I went off on a tangent.
I think so, but I think it goes where it needs to go. And that was
Yeah,
perfect. It makes a lot of sense. Again, how you simply put it. It's simple. It's not
it's
complicated of
right.
what you found. So the one thing I wanted to ask you too, as we start to wrap up and come to an end, well, one, where can they find you if they want to go down that rabbit hole of amazing, amazing
Well,
information?
the easiest way to find me is on YouTube. If you just type in John of New, you'll find my channel. It's on there. Over 1,700 videos on there. I also have a second channel called The Recovering Catholic,
Yes.
which you can go to there as well. Not nearly as many videos on that channel. Um, I also have johnofnew.com. And, there you can find out that I have meditations and I do private sessions with people and I do all kinds of things. That's all on johnofnew.com. And yeah, that's the easiest way to find me.
Yeah, I highly recommend for those listening that you go and check out some of these resources because it's just a very interesting perspective John shares. And again, I just really enjoyed it so much myself because it was simple and it resonated. That's the word of the show, I think.
So, yeah, yeah, resonate. The word of the show, right? Exactly. It's funny. It's funny. I go back to that Tesla line. Energy, frequency, and vibration in the body. They're all recognized as a feeling,
Yeah.
and I think God speaks to us in feelings, not thinkings.
Hmm.
And so when we feel like something's not right for us, that's the universe telling us it's not for us.
I
And the
100% agree with that. Yeah.
but we have to respond in the same language. We have to
Hmm.
say, yes, this is not for me, but I am joyfully receiving this. And you
Hmm.
put the infusion of the feeling of joy and love and compassion into. And here for anybody out there who's looking for love in their life. If you want to find the fastest way to find unconditional love in your life, what you do is you go out and you find the things that you absolutely love to do and stop looking for unconditional love
Hmm.
because if you're looking for it, you're actually projecting need. And no
Yeah,
one can
makes
see you
sense.
and love you for you if all they see is your need. So go out and do everything that you love and express yourself fully with what you love. And the people who will love you for you will see you and love you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's one to listen to like 5 times over to really take that in.
I had a woman tell me, help me, ask me to help her find her soulmate. And I told her that she was married in a year and a half.
It's funny how that works, huh?
Yep. Mhm. When we
Um,
get out of our own way.
that and I love I was listening to one of your episodes this morning, and one of the questions you asked on there around some of that was, if you could do anything you wanted to do without having to worry about money, how having to worry about the financial aspect of it, like what would you go do? And immediately that you were sharing that puts somebody into their present state. They're getting excited about all the things that they really do want to do. And
Yeah.
what that question, along with the other question of what is it that you would leave with somebody as they're going into the new year, of really great question or advice of just like, what can they really get this new year started off with? Being in that
Well,
loving space.
be in that loving space for yourself first, because understand you are putting a reflection out that will reflect back to you. And so be you to your fullest, unapologetically, and just put yourself out there and realize that you are the inspiration. God is the paintbrush, and the canvas.
Mhm.
All you and but the nothing goes on the canvas with the paint and the paintbrush without the inspiration first. And the final result is a combination of the two. And you choose what you want and simply believe it into existence. And here's the big secret of that. You need to stop trying to figure out how.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because how means it's not happening now, and now is the moment of creation.
Oh, I'm
Ask,
so
believe, and
glad you said
receive.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's super powerful. The how is where so many, oh, myself included, of course, have gotten hung up.
who hasn't gone down that route? Who hasn't gone down that route?
Yeah, and it doesn't
That's
work.
why there's 19 psychics that told me, because I was like, no, no, right? Get into our heads and how's this all working out? No, no, no. I'm not going to do it that way. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
yeah. So it really comes down to understanding that there's a line in the Bible, um, very famous line. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can ask a mountain to move and it'll move. Nothing is impossible for you. It doesn't say nothing is impossible for me, and if I want you to have it, I'll let you have it.
Hmm.
It literally says nothing's impossible for you. You can ask mountains to move. All the power is always in your hands. It's just a matter of you choosing and believing it in the now. And when you bring it back to this present moment, here's where a lot of people get stuck. I know we're running along here, but
You're fine.
um,
Finish.
here's
Yeah.
where here's where most people get stuck. They think that it's just magically going to appear into their life. And I really do think of it as energy in motion, like Einstein said, right?
Hmm.
So when I declare something, I don't say it's here now. A lot of people say, well, you have to believe it's here now. And like the new age folks will tell you that. I don't think so. I think I am bringing this into my experience, and it's flowing into my experience, and it's
Mm.
going to flow into my experience. It's going to express itself in my experience, and then it's going to become my memory. So it's always in motion. It's always going in one direction. But most people will think of the things behind their experience that's behind their boat, and they'll look at that and they'll go, that is who I am. Well, they're taking the past and making it your present moment declaration,
Hmm.
which means you're going to be in perpetual cycle. You're going to be in Bill Murray's Groundhog Day over and over and
Yes.
over again, right? It's a
That movie.
matter of
Yeah.
putting a period at the end of that chapter and saying, I am writing the story of my life, and I'm choosing to write a comedy, not a tragedy. Thank you very much.
Comedy, please. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and it's not even really a please. It's a I am. The
Hmm.
Bible literally says, whatever you ask in God's name is granted, and God's name is I am, not I was or I will be.
Hmm.
It literally comes down to that present moment thought that all of them talk about.
I am that I am.
And that's what Popeye said.
Hmm.
I, I am's what I am's, and that's all that I am's because I am's what I am's what
That is
I
so crazy. I used to watch that cartoon all the time and I never remembered that from it. But how
am.
interesting is that? Uh,
Yeah, yeah, and even you know, I said earlier, God can be found everywhere,
yeah.
right? And all religion, God can be found literally everywhere. Like when Yoda says, "Named must your fears be, before banish them you can," right?
Hmm.
Or "Do or do not, there is no try,"
Hmm.
right? That's all present moment. That's all George Lucas's own ideologies of spirituality coming through that character.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
and so you can find beautiful things. I was watching America's Got Talent one time, and this beautiful young woman came on, completely bald head. She was going through her last throes of cancer, and she sang beautifully, sang a beautiful song. But they were just talking to her, and she says, "Well, I decided you don't have to wait till things aren't hard to be happy." And most people tend to try to wait till things aren't hard to be happy, or to define happiness will happen ahead of me. But
Right.
that means you're not resonating with happiness now.
I'll be happy
You know?
when.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So be happy now, and happiness surrounds you because that's what you're resonating. So
it's powerful. So powerful. And I think we could probably talk for another hour, but that'll be the next episode.
I'm sure that's true.
You're a wealth of information and a wealth of stories and, great insight. And I truly appreciate you being here today, John.
Oh well, it's been a complete honor, and you let me know when this is going up, and I'll make sure the world hears it on my channel.
I will absolutely. So remember to check out the links in the podcast episode, and you can find all the information on John and how to contact him. And thank you again so much for being here. It was a lot of
Oh,
fun.
you're very.
Thank you so much for listening today. We greatly appreciate you being here, and we hope this episode was of value to you. If you would like to dive deeper into your own journey and your own path to your inner power, you can find all my information to schedule a call and access links in this podcast episode. Thank you for listening.